is it possible in this situation to turn tragedy into a treasure? To turn my despair into delight? To turn fear into power? And how might I do that? This has to have a little explanation. Turning tragedy into treasure. Let's say there's a disease that you've been diagnosed with, or let's say that you've been cheated on and left by your spouse. You were clueless. You were totally in love with them. You've been with them for decades. They cheated on you. They left you. It's just tragic. How can you turn that into a treasure? How can you possibly do that? Well, could you be stronger than you ever thought possible? Could you learn to accept something you thought you would never be able to accept? Could you actually forgive them? No matter how much it hurts. Could you learn to live alone and be okay with that? Could you learn to be okay with yourself? Could you grow psychologically and realize there's nothing wrong with you that caused them to do what they did? That they own their behavior. You don't. Could that allow you to stop blaming yourself for other things in life that you had no control over? On the flip side, could you learn to accept your part that you played in that situation? Maybe you were inattentive. Maybe you were abusive, not physically, maybe even just verbally. Maybe you were just not fully invested in nurturing a relationship, and so it got away from you. Could you learn to accept that and change that behavior and still suffer the sadness of the loss, but be a better person as a result? Those are just some examples of how you could take a tragedy and turn it into treasure. What about despair into delight? It's the same exercise. Fear into power. It's the same exercise. What unique features does this obstacle in your path have that will make you a better, stronger, smarter, faster, more accepting, more loving, kinder, more calm, more centered, more well-balanced, smarter individual than you were before? What about this situation will develop more emotional resiliency for you so you won't despair over something like this ever again? You'll be able to say, like my friend who lost everything said, you just need to go ahead and lose everything once, because once you've lost it once, you're never afraid of that again. You always know you can come back. What about fear into power? Fear can sometimes be a tough one because we may know we shouldn't be afraid. We may know it's not productive for us, but it's sometimes hard to turn it off. I believe you ultimately turn it off by acting, taking physical action, moving forward physically. Exercising, yes, is one thing I'm talking about, but maybe it means moving to a new city. Maybe it means moving to a new office. Maybe it needs getting into new circumstances with new people, having new conversations. You're in motion doing things to counteract your fear, facing your fear. You turn fear into power. I didn't say you made fear disappear, because often it doesn't. Courage, as we know, is not the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and doing the thing anyway. Turning fear into power, if you look up the dictionary definition of power, it means the potential to do work. The potential energy to cause something to happen. You can use fear to fuel your energy to get things done. You can literally turn fear into power. So how might you do that in your own life, in your own situation? Pause the recording and write it out in detail. If you have one sentence, you haven't spent enough time working on this. If you have no sentences, if you're just following along, nodding, saying, oh yeah, I'll think this through in my head, you haven't done it. Writing is the doing part of thinking. If you haven't written, you haven't done. If you haven't written, you haven't done. No, that wouldn't be right. That would be wrong. It would be, if writing you have not done, work you have not accomplished. Forgive me, Frank. Frank Oz. You get the idea. Go ahead, write down step 5. How might you turn tragedy into treasure, despair into delight, and fear into power?